The massive dog stood in the doorway and didn't move. 110 pounds of muscle. His dark eyes locked on the newborn in Claire's arms. For 3 days, he did something no one understood. On the 4th night, James set up a camera. What it captured at 2:47 a.m. saved his daughter's life. Before you watch, remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss another touching story like this one. And write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Atlas, come here, boy. James kept his voice low and steady. Atlas didn't move. He stood in the doorway of the living room, his massive head slightly lowered, his dark eyes fixed on the baby in Claire's arms. Claire had been home from the hospital for 11 minutes. Emma was 4 days old, 6 pounds 2 ounces, blonde, tiny, and perfect. He's fine, Claire said quietly. He's just curious. He's not curious, James said. Look at him. Atlas was a Cane Corso, 110 pounds of ancient guard dog bred for centuries to protect, to threat assess, and to act when action was needed. His black coat was short and tight over muscles that didn't quit. His jaw could crack bone. His eyes, dark and deep-set, missed nothing. Right now, those eyes were locked on Emma, unblinking and unmoving. Atlas. James snapped his fingers. Here. Atlas's ear twitched, but he didn't come. Claire shifted Emma in her arms. The baby made a soft sound, barely a breath. Atlas's entire body went rigid. Every muscle, every tendon. James stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between the dog and his wife. Maybe we should put him in the other room, he said, just until we figure out what's going on with him. Claire looked at Atlas, then at her husband, then back at the dog. Atlas hadn't moved an inch. His eyes were still on Emma, that focused, unreadable stare that James didn't recognize. In 4 years, Atlas had been gentle, obedient, and calm. He'd never shown aggression, never growled without reason. But this wasn't the dog James knew. This was something else. James had gotten Atlas as a puppy, 8 weeks old, from a breeder in Kentucky. He'd driven 6 hours and brought him home in a cardboard box on the passenger seat. Atlas had slept with his head on James's thigh the entire way. For years of mornings on the couch, 6 a.m. walks in the dark, and that massive head resting on his knee every evening without fail. James knew every inch of that dog, or at least he thought he did. Okay, Claire said quietly, just for tonight. James led Atlas to the laundry room. The dog went without resistance, but at the door, he stopped and looked back, not at James, but at Emma, that same fixed stare. James closed the door. He stood in the hallway for a moment, his hand still on the handle, feeling something in his chest he couldn't name. He told himself it was nothing. He was wrong. The first night passed quietly. Emma slept in her bassinet beside their bed. Claire fed her at 2 and again at 4. James lay awake between feedings, listening to the house. At some point around 3, he heard Atlas, not barking, not whining, just pacing back and forth across the laundry room floor, his nails tapping a slow, restless rhythm on the tile. James stared at the ceiling and told himself it was just the adjustment. New smells, new sounds, a new person in the house. Normal. By the 3rd day, it wasn't normal anymore. James had started letting Atlas out of the laundry room during the day, watching him carefully. The dog was calm everywhere in the house except one place, the nursery. Every time James or Claire carried Emma toward the nursery, Atlas followed. Not playfully, not curiously. He followed the way he followed strangers near the property line. Alert, focused, shoulders slightly raised. He keeps doing that thing with his head, Claire said on the 3rd evening, watching Atlas from the hallway. That lowered head like he's tracking something. I know it's not aggression. He's not showing teeth. He's not growling. He growled this morning. James said. Claire went still. He growled at you? Low, just once when my hand went toward her. Silence stretched between them. Claire looked at Atlas. The dog was sitting at the nursery doorway, perfectly still, his dark eyes moving between Emma's bassinet and the small vent on the wall beside the window. The vent. James had noticed that too. 3 times that day, he caught Atlas staring at that vent. Not at Emma, but at the vent. He told himself it was a draft, a smell coming through, something outside. The evening before, James had found Atlas standing at the nursery threshold, his hackles raised, not looking at Emma, but looking at the wall, completely still. James had timed it 11 minutes. Claire had seen it too and said nothing. They had gone to bed in silence. "You saw it last night," James said. It wasn't a question. Claire didn't answer right away. "Yes," she said finally. "I saw it. And I don't know what it means, but it isn't aggression. Isn't the same thing. What if it becomes the same thing? Maybe we should call the vet," Claire said. "Or the shelter," James said quietly. Claire turned to look at him. "James, he growled at me over our 4-day-old daughter. He didn't snap. He didn't lunge. He just... What if next time he does?" The word sat between them, heavy and cold. Claire looked at Atlas. Atlas looked at the vent. That night, James set up his phone on the dresser, angled toward the nursery doorway. He didn't tell Claire. He just wanted to see. He wanted to understand what was happening to his dog in the hours when the house was dark and quiet. He set the alarm for 4 a.m. When it went off, he reached for his phone with heavy hands and opened the footage. He watched himself carry Emma to the nursery at midnight. He watched Claire feed her at 2. He watched the house go still. Then at 2:47 a.m., he watched Atlas. The dog pushed the laundry room door open. James hadn't latched it properly. Atlas moved down the hallway without a sound, his massive body low and deliberate. He went straight to the nursery. He didn't go to Emma. He went to the vent. He pressed his nose against it and held it there for 4 minutes. He didn't move. Then he lifted his head and looked at Emma, then back at the vent. Then he lay down on the floor, directly in front of it, his body blocking it completely. His head on his paws, his eyes open, watching, waiting. James sat up in bed. He played it back, Atlas pressing his nose to the vent. For minutes, not looking at Emma, not circling her bassinet. The vent. James got out of bed. He walked to the nursery and crouched beside the vent on the wall. He put his hand in front of it and felt the faint push of air. He put his nose close. He smelled nothing, but something moved through him anyway. A cold, specific feeling he couldn't explain. He went back to the hallway and stood there in the dark for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and called a number he'd never called before, the gas company emergency line. The technician arrived 40 minutes later at 3:52 in the morning. James stood in the doorway watching him move through the house with his equipment. He went to utility room first, then the furnace. Then he stopped. He looked at his monitor, then at James. "Sir," he said carefully, "when did you last have your furnace serviced?" James felt the floor shift under him. 2 years ago, maybe 3. The technician looked back at his monitor. "You have a carbon monoxide leak coming from the heat exchanger. It's slow." He paused. "Slow enough that your detectors haven't triggered, but it's been building in the walls." James couldn't speak. "The nursery vent," the technician said quietly. "That room has been accumulating the highest concentration. Whoever sleeps in there?" He stopped and looked at James. "You have a baby?" James nodded. The technician said nothing more. He didn't need to. James walked back down the hallway. Atlas was still on the nursery floor, still in front of the vent, still watching. James stood in the doorway, looking at his dog. For years of loyalty, for years of gentleness, for years of patience. And he had spent the last 3 days thinking about shelter vans and surrender forms. His throat closed. Atlas turned his head and looked at him. Those dark, deep-set eyes, that massive ancient face. James crossed the room in 3 steps and dropped to his knees. He put both arms around Atlas's neck and pressed his face into that short black coat. Atlas went completely still, then leaned in just slightly, just enough. "I'm sorry," James whispered. "I'm so sorry, boy." Atlas didn't pull away. He never did. 3 days later, James carried Emma into the living room and set her gently on the blanket. Atlas walked over slowly. He lowered his massive head until his nose touched her hand. Emma's fingers curled around his ear. She held on. James watched and didn't say a word. Claire appeared in the doorway, her voice barely a whisper. "She already knows, doesn't she?" It wasn't a question. Did this story touch your heart? If yes, write yes in the comments, like this video, and subscribe to our channel. Would you have trusted Atlas the way Claire did? Yes or no? Let us know below. If you like the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.